The Magic Treehouse Fact Tracker, Knights and Castles. Chapter 6, Knights. Medieval minstrels often sang songs that told stories of heroes and their adventures. The heroes were all very brave and bold and fair. The heroes were knights. Knights had different names in different countries. In Spain, they were called caballeros. In Germany, they were called ritters. And in France, they were called chevaliers. All these words mean the same thing: horsemen. Knights were soldiers who fought on horseback. Becoming a knight. It took years of training to become a knight. It also took a lot of money. Horses and armor were very expensive, so most knights came from wealthy noble families. A boy who wanted to be a knight started his training when he was about 7 years old. At that time, his parents sent him to live in another lord's castle. He became a page. Not fair, only boys could become knights. A page served the lord's family their meals. He learned manners. He learned battle skills by fighting with wooden swords and riding on wooden horses. Wow, Jack could be a page. When a page was about 14, he became a squire. A squire was an apprentice to a knight. A squire took care of his knight's horses. He polished his knight's weapons and armor. If a knight were called to war, his squire went with him. A squire had to be ready to fight because his knight on the battlefield. So he practiced fighting with real swords and other weapons. Most important, he practiced his horsemanship. Horsemanship means horse riding skill. A squire had to learn to ride a horse without using his hands. On the battlefield, he would need both hands to hold his weapon and shield. Most squires became knights at about age 21. They were usually knighted at a dubbing ceremony. A squire could be dubbed or knighted by his father or by the knight who trained him. A squire from a very important family might even be dubbed by the king himself. At the dubbing ceremony, the new knight promised to be brave and loyal. He swore to protect his lord, his king, and his church. Becoming a knight. Step 1, become a page. Step 2, a squire. Step 3, the dubbing ceremony. And Step 4, being a knight. The Code of Chivalry. In the later Middle Ages, knights also promised to have good manners. They had to be fair to all people. They had to protect the weak. They had to be generous. And they had to honor and respect women. These rules came to be called the Code of Chivalry. Chivalry comes from the French word cheval, which means horse. In real life, knights could be ruthless and cruel, but the minstrel songs of heroes reminded them of the Code of Chivalry and how they had promised to behave. Turn the page to read about the most famous knights of all. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. During the Middle Ages, the most popular stories about knights were tales of King Arthur and his kingdom of Camelot. They were make-believe stories, but they may have been based on a real king who lived in Britain in the 6th century. One of the most famous stories about King Arthur is the fact of the sword and the stone. In the story, the people of Britain find a stone with a sword thrust into it. Writing on the stone says, "Whoever can pull the sword from this stone is the true King of Britain." A young page named Arthur is the only one who can pull the sword out of the stone. And here on the right, not only do we see a photograph, or at least an illustration of Arthur pulling the sword out of the stone, but Merlin as well. The person who put the sword in the stone was Merlin, a magician. After Arthur's crowned king, Merlin becomes his most trusted advisor. Merlin helps Arthur start the Knights of the Round Table. Arthur's knights gather at a table that is round so that each knight's place has the same worth. Two of the most famous Knights of the Round Table are Sir Lancelot and Sir Galahad. They both lived by the highest ideals of the Code of Chivalry. Two important women in the stories of King Arthur are Queen Guinevere and Morgan Le Fay. Guinevere is the beautiful wife of King Arthur. Morgan Le Fay is the half-sister of King Arthur. She learns magic skills from Merlin, such as how to fly and how to change her shape. And here on the right we see an image of a knight wearing a full plate armor.